All right, today I want to go over the K series fuse box that works as a universal fuse box for any K series engine, as well as our fuse box switch panel. It's also universal, but it is made to be used with this specific unit or the B series fuse box harness. So, what comes in the kit with the fuse box alone, you'll have the cap, the fuse box, the following leads here. You'll have the mating connectors for these three Deutsch connectors. And basically, the fuse box has an ECU relay, a starter relay, a fuel pump relay, a fan relay, and a primary O2 relay. So these relays are only what's needed to run the K engine. You can start this thing on an engine stand if you really wanted to, without even a car, just using the setup. Then you have your 4-pin leads here, which are outputs for fuel pump, the auxiliary switch here, and then the fan. The second connector here is the male 12-pin Deutsch connector. That's your switch connector, meaning it connects to either a switch panel or you can utilize these leads to connect it to your factory ignition switch. Next, we have the dash connector, which is a female 12-pin. This one you would have to custom wire to whichever cluster you're using, basically. It has the RPM signal, all the output lights like the check engine light, stuff like that. Next, we have the E connector, which is required if you're using Han data. Basically, it has the stock ground trigger for the fuel pump. It has some O2 wiring and the main relay trigger in here as well. Then we have the C101 connector. This connector connects directly to your engine harness. And then this connector connects to a Honda S300 if you were to use it. Then we have the ground connection. Make sure to put it to a good chassis ground that has a good ground, because this is what's going to power the whole unit, because this is a ground triggered harness for the most part. We opted out for using ground triggers because they're a lot safer to use. So make sure you hook up this ground to a good spot. And then last, we have the 12-volt lead connector, which goes to all the positive and powers on from the fuses to the relays. And this is what's going to distribute all the 12-volt power that goes to the whole box. Let me explain the switch panel next. So the switch panel, you'll have main, start, fuel, fan, auxiliary. Right now they are in the off position. So if you see here, they're up. When you press them down, that activates the switch. So basically, when you connect this to the fuse box, you hit the main switch. Now your ECU has power, coils have power, injectors have power. Basically, everything gets powered on through the fuse box, out the C101 to the engine harness. When you press the start switch, it's a monetary switch, meaning you press it, you let go, car starts, everything's good. Now, the fuel and the fan, so these are ground triggered switches and they are only overrides, meaning if they're in the off position, it doesn't mean your fuel pump will not work. The fuel pump and the fan will get triggered still by the ECU from the factory controls, but these are just overrides. So for example, in the event, like say you're standing there at the track and you want to cool down your intercooler radiator, whatever you want to do, you can override the fan to always stay on. You can always do the same thing for the fuel pump. So when they're in a down position, they will run regardless of the car is running or not. Now the auxiliary switch, the first one, that one powers the auxiliary port on the DT4 connector here. The second auxiliary switch is a high side switch. So it has 12 volts going through it, and you can utilize the 12 volt output by pinning an additional connector to this connector here. But for the most part, all the switches besides this one are ground triggered switches. And basically that's it. So once you plug these two together, you output the leads to the engine harness, hook up the power in the ground, your car is ready to start. You don't have to do anything else. And technically, to start the engine, you don't even need to have the cluster hooked up. It'll run without that because the S300 will output the RPMs, within the software. So if you wanted to test an engine on an engine stand, with this, you are able to do so. Super simple kit, and you can buy these together. We do sell them as a kit, or you can buy just the fuse box, run it to your stock ignition, or use a different switch panel if you'd like to make your own. Or you can just buy the switch panel if you're using it for a different setup. And the docks, they look like this. So you'll come with 4 pages, but these will be emailed instead of black and white. You'll have explanations of the 4-pin connector, the fuse box, the 12-pin Deutsch connectors, for both. And then that way you can have an easier time wiring it up to whichever setup you want. That's why this is labeled as a universal setup. It's not just meant to be used in a K series chassis car. So you can use this in a Send rail, MR2, I mean, a trike, you name it. So there you go. And signing out.